Welcome to the new Cannabis and Coffee Conversations podcast, brought to you by the ganjactivist.com magazine. Each week, we'll bring you special guests spanning the spectrum of the burgeoning cannabis industry. All right, well, let me just do a quick introduction now. Thank you for joining me, Mr. David Culver. You are the Senior VP of Public Affairs at the US Cannabis Council. How long have you been in that position, that post?
Yeah, so I've been in the cannabis space since the very beginning of 2019, so about 5+ years now. I started with the Canopy Growth Corporation, doing their government relations, again, beginning of 2019. And then in April of last year, Canopy had the very significant layoff globally, and that unfortunately included me and our entire global government relations team. It was about 75% of the company, actually, so it was a big one. And I'm still hopeful that Canopy rights the ship, and I think they're going to with their Canopy USA project. I'm excited about that for them. But I had the opportunity right away to go and work with US Cannabis Council, both handling their government relations and their public affairs. So that's what I've been doing since April of last year. And cannabis has been a slow-moving train in terms of reform, and it's, as always, a very bumpy ride. But I'm still very pleased to be involved in the industry.
Right. So how has it been kind of coming out of a very corporatized environment with Canopy into more kind of a public service, non-government, NGO, nonprofit environment? How did that transition work for you?
Yeah, so a couple comments there. First of all, I did come from a trade association in the alcohol space, where I was for 16 years prior to going to Canopy Growth and into that corporate setting. So I was very familiar with the trade association world, but I'll also say that I was part of a relatively small group of people that at the beginning of 2020 started talking about the need for industry unity in the trade association space. And there was an effort by some key people to try to bring unity within the industry as we focus on government affairs. And that's really what US Cannabis Council was created to do. We wanted a big tent. We wanted to make sure that everybody was welcome, and that's still the case. And we built in 2021, we launched it, and we built really a full service trade association, similar to what I was used to in the alcohol space. And we overbuilt a bit, I will say, in retrospect. But again, we thought that 2021 was going to be the year that the cannabis reform issues really materialized for us, and we were able to put some significant wins on the board federally. And of course, as you know, and we can get into that has not occurred. But it's been a relatively easy transition, and I'm hopeful that post some of these reform efforts that we've been working on, there's actually more investment into the trade association, so we can do more work federally and in the states.
All right. So what has been your primary initiative? I know there've been reforms, there've been table things in the Senate and the House with safe banking. Then there was the safer banking. There's just a number of different strategies, I guess, to try to help to bolster the industry, I guess. Even prior to rescheduling, we can get to that in a second. But what's where do you guys stand? What's your primary initiative at the moment?
Yeah, well, we have had a primary focus on Capitol Hill, and we have not branched out significantly into the states, but that's something that we are looking to do in the years ahead. And again, this is really gonna hinge on funding, but I would like ultimately for US Cannabis Council to have the same type of state programming that I enjoyed in the alcohol space. So contract lobbyists, agencies of record in every single state capital. And I think, the bulk, this is the state there. They are state programs. The regulatory structures are at the state level. So, I think for us to show the most value for our members, we're going to need to expand into the states at some point in the future. So that's on the list. That's something that we're thinking about. But in terms of the work that we're doing on Capitol Hill, the biggest initiative that or the longest initiative is, of course, the Safe Banking Act that you referenced. And that bill has been kicking around for 10 years. We have come so close so many times. And this is, it's a public safety bill. It's something that is bipartisan. It's passed the House of Representatives in some way, shape, or form 7 times. It went through regular order this time in the Senate. So, we still feel like there's a possibility for us to get that reform measure done before the end of the year. We can talk more about that as you'd like. We're also focused.
I was just about to ask, but let me
Yeah.
interject real quick. I mean, because isn't that also getting a lot of pushbacks? I know that there's Senator Schumer who's strongly supportive, and you got Senator Booker who kind of been against it. Again, somewhat opposed to it because it kind of opens the industry up for this a lot more free banking. That doesn't really solve the issues with the war on drugs and so on and so forth. I mean, how is that conversation panning out?
Yeah, great question. So this has been a conversation that has been going on for quite some time. And I think, in an ideal world, cannabis is taken off schedule completely. We formally end the war on drugs, and we take measures to deal with those individuals that have been harmed by the war on drugs and communities that have been harmed. But the politics of the matter for the moment are that we have a divided government, and the Safe Banking Act is probably the most palatable in terms of cannabis reform for both the House and the Senate. And, again, I think if they were to put this bill on the floor of both houses today, I think it passes overwhelmingly. And I also think that it has enough votes in the Senate to get past that 60 vote threshold that you need to reach, right? So my vote count right now has it in the Senate at about 65, and maybe a bit more, because there's a lot of members that are not interested in co-sponsoring the bill, but they're not going to vote against it, especially if they're in a legal state.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
And we definitely have more than enough votes in the House to pass this. But the Democrats could have put this on the floor in 2021. I think they could have gotten it done, and instead they really held all cannabis measures, with the exception of the MORE Act, which never had a chance in the Senate. They held everything until President Biden made his announcement on rescheduling in October of 2022. And then they tried to push the Safe Banking Act in the lame duck period, so the post-election period. That failed. It failed again last year because we had divided government in the new Congress. And we'll see now what happens this year in the lame duck session. And that's where we are. Like, we are waiting on the results of the election, and that's going to determine what happens in the lame duck period, if anything. And if there is a vehicle for us to attach safe banking to, that is our shot. And then we're going to have to reassess, because we go right back into a new Congress and we start this all over again.
Right. Start from scratch. What do you think, since we're speaking about the elections, what do you this could be an interesting lame duck period, because we do have an incumbent president who could have run, who decided not to run, and then we have the period where his vice president is actually campaigning and has come out in support of decriminalizing cannabis. Do you think that between now and the election, or even between now until next January, there's some fundamental could change, even as far as decriminalization, which is what people like Biden and both Harris have actually called for? Do you think there's something significant?
Yeah, so I actually I think the most significant thing that is going to happen is the position that this presidential candidate takes. So this is the first time that we have a pro-legalization candidate. In fact, we have two. We have the Harris and Walz both are pro-legalization, and they have a long record proving their position on this. And I think that they plan to use cannabis reform as an issue during the next few months, the next 90 days. And that in unto itself is historic and important. So, are we going to remove cannabis from schedule and begin to deal with the wrongs of the war on drugs? Not before the end of the year. But the way I vision this is that we have this historic moment with this presidential ticket. For the first time, we have a candidate that is pro-reform, 100% pro-reform, not squishy in any way, shape, or form. And that's important and historic. And I also think that she's going to be able to take her from her bully pulpit. If she wins, she's going to be able to take the ball that Joe Biden started to roll and on reform, and she's going to be able to take it and do much more than he did. Now, the rescheduling that they're going through right now. Obviously, it's significant. I know you want to talk more about that, but politically, I think that I'll just say that if the final rule comes out before the end of the year, and I believe that it will, it's going to change the politics of the discussion about cannabis reform, because cannabis is not sitting next to heroin anymore on Schedule 1. It's sitting next to Tylenol with codeine.
Right.
Okay, so like a lot of conservative lawmakers that don't want anything to do with cannabis reform, I think they're going to evolve on this issue. I think they're going to soften their position. In fact, many of them told me that they're going to. They may not lead on this, but it's going to be a lot easier for them to work on reform issues, especially those that are minor, like the Safe Banking Act. This is providing depository
banking access, right? Exactly. Yeah. Security. So how do you? That's an interesting dynamic that you mentioned about the election. I also want to get back to what you guys are also working on, because I did kind of interject there. But how do you think, because with especially with the rescheduling, if it is rescheduled to Schedule 3, of course there's the ultimate decriminalization, descheduling goal, which is not really necessarily what they're considering, unfortunately, except for within the comment period. But how do you think that's good if we do have if it is rescheduled to Schedule 3, so it is seen as less harmless, seen appropriately less harmless, and having medicinal value. Where does that put the people like in Florida with the GOP and Ron DeSantis, who's apparently not running again? But how does that, where does that put them? If we have rescheduling and down to Schedule 3, are they going to still be trying to put millions of dollars into opposing Amendment 3? How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, a very interesting political dynamic in Florida, and I think that we're talking about two very separate things. So first of all, let's talk about the rescheduling. So the rescheduling, I think still that they're going to have the final rule out before the election, and I've actually put the over/under at October 1.
Okay.
So I think they're going to have it out soon, and they want to talk about it on the campaign. They want to talk about what they've done. They want to talk about how it is it is a massive and a historic step towards ultimately ending the war on drugs and taking cannabis off schedule, right? And I firmly believe that it is. So that, as I mentioned earlier, is going to change the political dynamic with a lot of these members, not just in Washington, but in state capitals. It's going to be easier to establish reform and or medical or adult use markets in states. And I think that, people are going to be thinking like, well, if this is equated with Tylenol with codeine, like why are we so concerned about this? Right. So I think that's one side of the coin. Now, the other side of it is this intoxicating hemp issue that you referenced. And there's been a very interesting and strange political dynamic where you had hemp companies that had put $5 million roughly into the governor's coffers, and they unfortunately were texting back and forth about it, and I read them. I read that. Where you read all that.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's very strange that the governor has decided that he is very much against this adult use campaign, yet he's comfortable with these hemp-derived products, many of which are unregulated, untested, and non-age gated. So I just, like, from a responsibility point of view, and that's where I come down on all of this, I want to make sure that the kids can't get their hands on this stuff. And I also want to make sure that these products are not adulterated. And many of them are, and I'm not saying that there are not a lot of really good actors in the hemp-derived space, even those making intoxicating products, because there's great actors and they are doing all the right things, but there's also a lot of bad. So, we need these. If you are going to make an intoxicating product, you've got to regulate it. And we haven't had any guidance out of the federal government on this. Congress is divided on it, not just Democrats and Republicans, but Republicans and Republicans are divided on this. The industry is divided. And as a result of that, you're just not going to see any progress on the Hill until we can find some sort of common ground. And that's what we're working on at USCC during this recess month, to try to find a lowest common denominator for the industry to rally around.
Right. I was going to ask you exactly that, because as I mentioned before, we're trying to launch a little campaign to get the hemp just to stop funding Ron DeSantis and to start supporting the Amendment 3, yes on 3. We're trying to counter that. But it's interesting. I mean, how is that? But I've heard that, okay, so some of their arguments with that, well, the cannabis industry wanted to heavily regulate hemp and they wanted to support that, so on and so forth. Is there this discord across the states? I mean, is it, or is this kind of a more of a Florida specific? I can imagine probably Texas eventually, but I mean, is this like, as you're seeing in Capitol Hill, is this a conversation that the lobbyists are fighting against each other, and how is that working out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've, for the most part, been very civil with one another, but there are pretty clear battle lines that have been drawn both in Washington and in state capitals. This is not just an issue that's happening in Florida. This has been an issue that the attorneys general, as a group, have been raising with their federally elected officials for years. And
Okay.
the big hangup that the AGs have had is that they're worried about, they're seeing intoxicating hemp products that are adulterated and that are causing emergency room visits. They're worried about,
Right.
they're seeing products that look like things that appeal to children. So Skittles and Doritos and all that kind of stuff that is available at gas stations or bodegas that kids are getting their hands on because they're not age gating it. So, they've been raising this for ever since I've been in the cannabis industry, honestly, really since the Farm Bill passed, these products pop up, but now they're everywhere. And, you can find them. I'm here in Washington, DC. They're all over the place. So I think the states are starting to take action on this. We've seen one after the other that are trying to limit these programs or regulate them in a responsible way. But that's really, at the end of the day, what the discussion needs to be about. And it's about responsible, being a responsible actor. And you make something that's intoxicating, like, you have to keep it out of the hands of kids.
Right. Hands down, absolutely. And inform people of what they're consuming as well, let them know and make them make the appropriate, informed decision as well. That's fundamentally important as well, especially in this new, I mean, the cannabinoid, that's all kind of new to people. You don't want to, you're either going to turn people off completely, after their first try, or it could go badly as it has. I agree.
Well, and it's such a strange dynamic too. Like if you're a business that's been at this for a long time and you have spent a lot of money to build your state infrastructure, your seed to sale, because you can only operate intrastate, not interstate.
Right, exactly. Right.
So you've built that infrastructure, you've invested in a license. We have a model that states have established through the dispensaries that make sure that these products are age gated and that they're not adulterated. And, for the most part, these state systems work well. So when these products are coming online that have the same THC as what you're seeing in medical and adult use markets, and yet they're available everywhere, those that have been working so hard for so long in the state markets are feeling like they're at a very competitive disadvantage, and rightly so. Because again, it's the same THC that's going into these.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
They're just hemp derived. So I think that there's going to be a middle ground here ultimately, where folks settle on either a limited amount of federal oversight, and there's a number of bills that are in the works right now that would provide that. They haven't been introduced yet, but you'll see them in September most likely, and we'll see how they move. But states also are going to continue to take action on this, and I think that the best way to think about it is really making sure that the regulatory structure is in place so that the same goals that you had with medical and adult use programs, you also have with these intoxicating hemp products.
And any word you like to give, say, to the bad actors, which we know exist, and well, you saw the text messages. I mean, that's the extent of bullying. With this, like, oh my goodness, that can't be. Yeah, I mean, what's your thought on that, really?
Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking about here is perfectly legal political giving. And, the system that we have set up here in the United States and in many states allows for that type of donation to occur, without any direct tie to policy or decision making. Now, I'm not going to comment on that because I think the media has already done that for me. But, in this particular case, like, they were operating, within the confines of the law. And honestly, US Cannabis Council and our members, we need to do a better job of playing the political game, and that means political giving.
Right, right on.
I think that again, like, it's the system that these politicians built. I didn't build it, but I understand it, and we need to be a part of it in order to make sure that we're elevating our political game to help advance reform, because it's not just about being a common sense policy expert, which many of us are in this space, but it's about playing that political game too.
Right, right. Okay. Okay. So what are your plans? Well, in light of that, where are you? What's your involvement in this current election cycle? Are you boots on the ground? What are you in Florida? Ohio? Well, Ohio just passed, I think. Where is it? Wisconsin. There are a couple of more interesting states coming on stream and so on. What are you guys up to for that?
Yeah, so we are we're very involved with the scheduling coalition, which is the coalition that was created about a year and a half ago to advance scheduling reform. You know, again, they were created it shortly after President Biden initiated the process, and they've done a really good job at commenting where they were able to, and you know, being a voice of reason in terms of the process and making the right legal arguments and scientific arguments. So we've been a part of that, and that's been something that is important. And politically, I mentioned that at the outset because I do believe that the Harris campaign is going to use this politically when Schedule 3 is announced, and we continue to press on them to move on this sooner rather than later. In fact, there was a letter that a number of senators just sent to the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services, pressing on them to get this final rule out and to do it expeditiously. So these are the kind of things that we're doing behind the scenes. The second is that we do have a super PAC at US Cannabis Council. It's called Legalize America. And we want to be able to use that during this election cycle in order to provide funding to the super PACs that are supporting candidates that are pro-cannabis. We want to see, right? We want to see candidates get elected to office that have a pro-cannabis
support, right?
So that's
I was just reading there was in Florida, there's apparently some billionaire that just get 20 million to candidates who are against, you know, cannabis legalization. So that's clearly going to be necessary. I don't know.
He's the billionaire from the Citadel Fund. I think he gave $12 million.
12 million. That's right. 12 million. Right. Yeah.
You know, and I don't know that individual, but I disagree with his policy position on this. And I think that it's a mistake for anybody politically, or those that are funding these political efforts, to think that putting in a regulated system is the wrong idea for any state or federally. And, you know, ideally, and I talk about this all day, every day, we really need to see a federal regulatory structure that ends the federal state conflict and that provides that bit of, even if it's a fairly light touch like what we have with beverage alcohol, it provides enough regulatory structure that we are dealing with all of the responsibility efforts in a sophisticated way, just as beverage alcohol does. So, you know, I'm talking about advertising and marketing standards. I'm talking about labels and formulas approvals. I'm talking about drug driving. So
right, of course, you're right.
People in the cannabis space,
kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
They like to squabble with me about this. You know, they say that cannabis is not the issue, but when you combine alcohol and cannabis and opioids, which is typically what these high BAC offenders have in their system, that's a problem, and cannabis is a part of that problem. So we need to be able to work with NHTSA and the Department of Justice on a solution, but we can't do that because we're still federally illegal.
Federal, right on.
And same thing with bets. Yeah.
I mean, what do you because there's been when the rescheduling, when they open up the comment period, you know, there's a lot of consternation about what's going to happen, a lot of speculation whether it's going to be positive, negative. It's only going to affect large companies. It's going to crush the small man. What do you think the effects of rescheduling are going to be? Because of course the primary thing we're talking about is banking. 280E is going to go away and so on. But what do you think the effects are really going to have on the industry at large?
Yeah, I think that again, I think it's going to further help normalize cannabis politically. We talked about this already, and I think that is as significant as anything that Schedule 3 is going to do. Schedule 3 is not going to disrupt existing state markets, period, full stop. And, this is one of the things that I hear on a regular basis, that, the FDA is going to come in and they're going to disrupt everything that we have built in state legal markets. And that's absolutely untrue. But the 280E provision and the removal of that tax burden is going to be a game changer for the industry. And, when their effective tax rates are between 75 and 80%, you can't make money at that rate. And so I think once the 280E burden is removed, and I'm hoping that happens this year, I think that's going to be the turning point financially for this industry to start really reaching the financial goals that we all thought they were going to. And then in terms of like who's going to benefit on this, well, let's just think through this. If you're a 10-state, multi-state operator and you're one of the largest, and then you've got the guy that is a medium-sized, he's a 1-state operator that has 5 dispensaries, so he's medium-sized. And then you have a single dispensary owner that is in 1 state and he runs everything himself. And let's say that he also is a minority applicant, an equity operator. So all 3 of these entities are going to benefit significantly, and their effective tax rates are going to drop to 20%. So whether you're a $200 million company, or whether you're a $10 million company, or whether you're a $500,000 company, you are going to benefit from that tax rate. And so all of my friends that are setting up their dispensaries and they're single entity owners, they're equity operators, let's say they have $1 million business. All right. They're paying $800,000 in tax.
Currently, right. Yeah.
You're not making any money. But when they
not legally, at least, for sure.
No, but when they're going to pay 20, they're going to make a lot of money. And I hope that they do. And I hope that, we see success. But I really don't like the commentary that we continue to hear that this is only going to be a benefit to the largest operators. And that's absolutely not the case. Like, the small producers are desperate for this tax benefit. They're desperate for it.
Anything else you'd like to add in there? I think we covered quite a bit of ground, actually. I do appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to throw it? Again, it is exciting times. Interesting turnout with the elections, interesting pick of VP. Rescheduling is on the horizon. Interesting 2025 ahead. Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, just I would say everybody that's working in the space, keep your heads up, keep working at this. Cannabis reform has moved slower than any of us expected it to. It's never going to move, I don't think, at lightning speed. But I do think that we are at this pivotal moment right now in 2024. So much of it hinges on this election. It hinges on rescheduling, and it hinges on what that lame duck period looks like, and whether we can get reform done during that period. And also, I cannot stress enough the importance of the Florida ballot initiative. You talked about it early on. If Florida goes to full adult use, not only is the market going to be very valuable to those in the space, but I think it sets the stage for that whole southern region and red states to follow suit. So those are all things that are going to happen in the next 90 to 150 days. And I'm excited about where we are and hopeful that we have a lot of positive news to talk about in 2025.
Right on, and we will check back with you to have another conversation. How's that? That would be great.
Please do.
Right on. All right. No, thank you very much. I think we definitely covered a lot of ground. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can ask about Florida. Florida's so bizarrely, it's so evenly kind of split between the two sides. You can't even, there's no nuanced questions to ask. How do you think the elder generations feel like they're gonna? It's just, I don't know. It's apparently about 65% now approval. But again, you got the GOP. I mean, that's a strong force. But
yeah. I mean, I think the polling numbers look good. For everything I've seen in Florida, and I keep track of it closely, the numbers still look very good there. I don't know if President Trump is going to engage in the cannabis issue in any way, shape, or form over the next 90 days. I have some very good political operatives on the Republican side who believe that he will, but I don't know. And that obviously is the one thing that could change for better or for worse. the dynamic significantly. But as things stand right now, I think that the reform, even though it's got to hit that 65% threshold, I think it does. And again, it's like Florida goes adult use. It's a game changer for the South and for other red states.
All right, great speaking to you again, David. Yeah, keep up the good fight, man. Let's make all these things happen.
All right, thanks for the time. I appreciate you.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Cannabis and Coffee Conversations podcast, brought to you by GanjaActivist.com magazine. Join us every Friday for a new episode.